And it's Football Friday morning here on Birds 365. You got your Mac and Mac guys, John McMullen and Jody McDonald. The countdown is in earnest to the start of Eagles season. Just 18 days till they report down at the NovaCare complex. And yeah, we're getting excited and pumped up. We appreciate all you guys who stream in this early. If you're already listening to Birds 365, thank you very much. You've just officially achieved diehard status. Those of you who get in here bright and early for the entire 2-hour foray of Eagle conversation, thank you very much. If you want to hit the like button, we won't be upset by that, but appreciate you getting with us for the entire show. Johnny Mac, we got 2 hours of good Eagle conversation, 2 good Eagle guests, Eagle-specific guests. Yesterday, we had Vinny Serrato on, former executive at both the 49ers and the Skins, now talk show host in Baltimore these days. I was kind of bummed not having Vinny on, not because he's Vinny, because he's always a good guest, but by what he had to say. Because I've been singing the praises, trying to open the door for Patrick Queen to be delivered here to Philadelphia, because my major question is still at linebacker for the Eagles. I think they got a damn good roster. I think they're the favorites to win the NFC again. But I have Nicholas Morrow questions as a starter going into the season. And it seemed that Patrick Queen was just a guy who made sense, that they chose not to pick up his fifth-year option as a first-round draft pick, that they drafted a linebacker in the early third round to potentially fill in for Patrick Queen. It sounds to me, and Vinny's there all the time covering the Ravens and is tight with their coaching staff and their front office. It doesn't sound like they're looking to move Patrick Queen anytime through. And I know you guys have been holding the line. I've been saying I'd be willing to give up a day 2 pick for him. And you've been saying Howie Roseman will not give up a day 2 pick for a linebacker. You got no chance of getting Patrick Queen for a day 3 pick.
Well, I think you got no chance of getting Patrick Queen because they're not going to trade him. I mean, before I got to that, now from the Eagles' perspective, if he was on the market, I don't think they would go to a day 2 pick. So it's kind of like back and forth. Well, he's not on the market, so I don't think he's going to be on the market no matter what, because Baltimore thinks they're a Super Bowl contender, which they're a very good team. I said, if they're in the NFC, I told Vinny, they're a Super Bowl contender. I don't know if they are on the AFC side because it's so difficult. But from their perspective, they want to go for it. They want to try to win. And, a rookie 3rd round pick. I think people overblew the not picking up the 5th-year option. And Vinny, being the former executive he is, brought up a lot of good points. One, we always talk about labels, you and I. Drives me crazy, Pepe. Hassan Reddick, he's a linebacker. Nolan Smith's a linebacker. Why can't you play Nolan Smith at all? He's a linebacker. It says he's a linebacker. Play him instead of Nicholas Morrow. 2 completely different positions. Now, here's where it becomes problem for people like Vinny or people like Howie Roseman. When you start talking about options and things like that and franchise tag, and they still have these antiquated labels, right? Linebacker means linebacker. So if you list the guy as a linebacker, doesn't matter if he's off ball, doesn't matter if he's edge, he's a linebacker. So all the transition tags, the franchise tags, the option tags, they're all the same for each position. Now, obviously, the 5th-year option has to do with where you're selected.
Right.
But the transition tags, that's a little bit different. So from the larger strategy position, and you've seen this around the league, and I brought this up a number of times, it used to be a death knell. If you didn't pick up the 5th-year option or 1st-round pick, you're done with them. It's no longer a death knell at certain positions, and it happened 3 times this offseason where teams didn't pick up the 5th-year option and they re-signed the players anyway. It's not that they didn't like the players. It's that they saw the positions, they saw the value. They said, that's not worth it. Let's just renegotiate. They end up having a good year or good enough year. and you revisit it and potentially re-sign that particular player. Now, in Patrick Queen's instance, I don't think they're going to bring him back, but you never know. And I'm talking about not this year. I'm talking about next year. The problem with them is they're already playing Roquan Smith at all. You can't pay 2 all-ball linebackers. Well, you can. Chicago proved it. San Francisco, to a degree, proves it. And incidentally, those are probably the 2 best all-ball linebackers teams in the league because they're willing to pay the players.
Right.
Funny how that works out. But most teams don't want to do that, and I don't think Baltimore wants to do it. So ultimately, he'll go. But the reality is, they're a Super Bowl contender. Trenton Simpson isn't ready. They're going to try to win and deal with it themselves. And if Patrick Queen plays well and plays himself into this big contract, then the Eagles aren't going to sign him. Somebody will sign him, and they'll get the compensatory pick. So it works both ways, depending on what they do in free agency, because obviously if they sign other players, it could cross that out. But there's a lot of options, and Vinny kind of brought them all up. And the number one reason is they think they're a Super Bowl contender.
And they should
trade him. Yeah.
Any year you make your quarterback the highest paid quarterback, as fleet moving as that can be. We've noted several times Jalen Hurts was the highest paid quarterback in the NFL for less than a week because Lamar signed immediately thereafter. And we're waiting on Burrow and Herbert to potentially pass Lamar as the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Any offseason, you do that. You went through the entire year playing the game of Patsy with Lamar back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I will absolutely say that because of the Jalen Hurts contract that basically made the Lamar Jackson contract doable, if Jalen wasn't getting Deshaun Watson guaranteed money, Lamar said, yeah, I'm not getting that either, seeing as he was the runner-up for the MVP. And I missed a whole boatload of games last year where the Eagles did the Ravens a major solid by getting the deal done with Jalen Hurts. Yeah, any year like that, you have to go in with we're competing this year. We're taking a step back to take 2 forwards at a future date. No, we're in. We're in this year.
I'm 100%. I agree with Baltimore. Look, I hate teams, and I hate the philosophy. It's really overriding sports as a whole, not just the NFL. Because and it's creeping into my mind. I look at Baltimore and say, well, that's a pretty good team. And as I said, if you put them in the NFC, it's a legitimate contender because there's not a lot of great teams. But if you ask me, are they better than Kansas City? Well, no. Are they better than Buffalo? Probably not. And there's a number of other teams. You look at the AFC East, you look at the AFC North, they're both loaded. What if Deshaun Watson turns into Deshaun Watson from Houston? How loaded is the AFC North if that happens?
Tough division.
There's so many good teams. I look at it logically and say, well, Baltimore's probably not going to go to the Super Bowl. But then on the other hand, I look at, and we talk about Minnesota on the NFC side. They win 13 games and they throw up their hands. Look, I can't agree with that. From a holistic standpoint, I agree with them. Yeah, you're not really a contender, but I hate that mentality of, oh, we won 13 games, but we got lucky. What is that? And you unplug it and say, we got to rebuild. I hate that mentality. So I'm not going to criticize Baltimore for their thinking. That's the way you have to think. If you don't believe in yourself, nobody's going to believe in you. I mean, it's as simple as that.
And as I was trying to point out with Lamar Jackson, sometimes your moves dictate it. If you sign Lamar Jackson, they could have gone let's take a step backwards to take 2 forward a future date. Not in a year where you're paying your quarterback, making him the highest paid quarterback in the game. You can't. You can't send those mixed messages to your team, to your fan base, or to anybody else. I was just hoping because I really like the player. I loved him kind of coming out of LSU. I love the progress that he's made over his 3 years. This could be a breakout year for him. And I thought that this would be a fine place for him to have that breakout year here in Philadelphia with the Eagles. But it doesn't look like Baltimore is moving off him. And if they did, they'd be asking for a price that the Eagles just seem to be unwilling to pay. I still maybe something that maybe the kid from Clemson steps up and plays huge in preseason, and they do believe he's ready to step in and play. Yeah, I'm doubting it. So get ready for your Nicholas Morrow season here in Philadelphia. But hey, Howie Roseman's got the entire preseason to potentially do something else. All right, let me ask you about the guy you mentioned. That would be Hassan Reddick, who you and I both agree he's an edge player. You want to call him a defensive end? Go ahead. You want to call him an outside linebacker? Go ahead. He's, for me, really neither one of those. He's an edge player. We have to create new descriptive adjectives for NFL players as the league and the game changes. He's an edge guy. But for the purpose of the question I'm going to ask John, I'm going to call him a defensive end, okay? Because he's not a linebacker. You list him as a linebacker, put him on the roster as a linebacker. He's not going to be dropping back into coverage. He's not going to be playing 5 yards off the line of scrimmage. So he's not, in my mind, what I think of as a linebacker. But we will look at him as a defensive end for today's conversation. They got a bunch of defensive ends on this team, John. We know who the main rotational guys will be, Reddick and Graham and Sweat. We assume Smith's going to play. I have some concerns about that. Not because I don't think Smith's going to be a very good player. I do. And I think the Eagles got him at a value spot at the end of the first round. I think he could have been drafted higher than that. But we need to find out what the new defensive coordinator thinks of playing rookies and getting them up to speed. Last year, there were very few rookies, except for Jordan Davis, who got a significant time. Reed Blankenship did just because he had to, because there were no other options when CJ went down with an injury. So I think Smith is going to play, but maybe less than the top three. He might not get as many snaps as the others. But Barnett and the Johnson brothers, Patrick and Kyron and Taron Jackson, how many defensive ends can this team actually keep? If you've got your four, count Smith as one of the four main rotational guys, Barnett, both Johnsons, and Jackson, that's 8 guys. They're not keeping
you can cross Kyron off the list. They moved Kyron to off-ball linebacker. They're trying to find a place for him on the roster.
You don't think they're going to play him any on the edge?
No. Just because of what you said. And they're really trying to find a place so he could play special teams anyway. That was his reputation coming in, that he might be a really good special teams player. Didn't really develop that way as a rookie, but still tremendously athletic. Michael Clay often brings up there's a lot of differences between college special teams and NFL special teams. So there's a lot of learning to go on, rule changes, differences, different philosophies, things like that. But yeah, I mean, they're going to keep a lot of defensive linemen, but you can't go much past 10. You could probably squeak it till 11 if you really like somebody. Well, I was talking to an executive. I mentioned this on the show outside of Philadelphia, not with the Eagles, said they had 17 or 18 legit NFL defensive linemen, front players. Again, I'm talking edge rushers and interior combined. That's freaking unbelievable. And I'm not talking, he's talking about guys like Janarius Robinson, who's probably an NFL player, Kentavious Street, who's an NFL player that might not even make this team because they're so deep, but they deserve to be somewhere in the NFL. They're probably going to keep 5 edge rushers, and it's going to be it's going to be Reddick, it's going to be Sweat, it's going to be Brandon Graham, it's going to be Nolan Smith, and then it depends. We've talked about Derek Barnett a lot. I don't think they want to carry Derek Barnett as the 5th defensive end. I think they want to move him. I think they want to trade him if they can. If they do, ultimately, if he proves he's healthy, then that probably opens that final slot for Patrick Johnson. Or Janarius Robinson. I mean, Janarius Robinson, we haven't seen him yet. Well, people like me have seen him. First of all, he looks like he could play. I mean, that guy he's the Tyree Jackson of the defense. He is just so impressive physically. They might want to keep him in that direction, but then you have to toggle the interior. They might be deeper on the interior than they are on the edge, because they want to keep somebody like Morrow Jomo as a 7th round pick. Can they? I don't know. They like Marlon Tuipulotu. We'll see if he's able to come back from an injury. Guys like this, they want to keep Noah Ellis, Christian's brother, simply because they want to back up for Jordan Davis. And all of a sudden, if you lose Jordan Davis again for a month, say, well, who's playing nose tackle? Then you got to make people like, is Contavious Street? I brought him up. Is he going to make it? It's a 4 or 5 year NFL player who's been on good defenses, San Francisco and New Orleans. They're so deep on the defensive line, but you can't go much past 10. You can't. You could probably finagle it to get to 11 if you're weaker.
Not if you want your special teams to be good. And you and I both know that was one of the Eagle. I come up short of calling a weakness, but one of their less strong areas was special teams last year. And I think part of that was because when in doubt, they'll give that extra roster spot to the trench, be it either offensive line or defensive line, which is good. And you get to keep your depth and you believe in your guys. Yeah, but when guys are been making big plays against you on special teams, I fear to do this, but the Super Bowl would be one example. You can't go, oh, how do we let that? Well, that's because you didn't dedicate roster spots to getting the best of your special teams players. You kept an extra man in the trenches.
And they've gotten away from that. They used to do that with Dave when Dave Phipp was here. They'd have 1 or 2 guys who are just special teams players. And yeah, it's not sexy, but sometimes it's needed. But if you do that, those guys better be good at it. They better be really good at it. And in other words, Kyron Johnson, I'm telling you, they're trying to find a roster spot for him. Well, he better stink and produce if they're doing that. And there's questions if that's going to happen. Ben Van Sumeren, keep an eye on him as well, the rookie.
Right, but he's a quote-unquote linebacker, and I know we get dicey with definitions. He's an unquestioned linebacker, and the Eagles don't really have a love affair with linebackers. Will they do it just for a special teams guy? If he's that good, yeah, maybe is the answer. All right, John McMullen, Jody McDonald, Mac Birds 365. We're going to get a new guest up here. We've never had Rob Kessner, Eagles senior producer for NBC 10, join us. We always like to get new voices and new faces into the mix. Rob Kessner up next with us on Birds 365.
Do you